The all-new Jeopardy pilot. Obviously, Jeopardy needs no introduction, being one of, if not the most popular game show ever to have aired, and still ongoing today, since 1964, with well over 9,000 episodes being filmed. However, the show briefly concluded in 1974, before coming back to the air in 1978, under a different production company and a new name, the all-new Jeopardy! Debuting on NBC in October of that year, and hosted by Art Fleming, the show only ran for less than a year, and about 100 episodes, before ending in March of 1979. Eventually though, the original series was brought back, and has since become a mainstay in terms of American game shows. But this relatively short-lived revival had an unused and unaired pilot which was filmed back in 1977, a year prior to the first episode's debut broadcast. This was a pitch pilot which was shown to CBS and was ultimately passed on, hence why it would later air on NBC. The pilot was quite a bit different in terms of format from the one that would be publicly shown a year later. It more closely resembled the original series set but had different rules. For example, the game would start with contestants having 30 seconds to gather money to start with from the board before starting the actual first round, with contestants picking from the clues. Because this pilot was unsold and never aired, it became lost media and wasn't seen for almost 50 years, until finally, in March of 2025, a guy named Adam Nedev posted the entire pilot episode to his Facebook account. DXP. Children's and Cartoon Networks are known for having quite a few short-lived and sometimes obscure blocks, which aired on their channels, sometimes late at night and in the early morning hours, when most people weren't awake to see them, and have since fallen into obscure media territory, or are simply now just foggy childhood memories. One of these such blocks was called DXP, and aired from July to November 2017 on Disney XD from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. DXP marketed itself as a gamer program, containing various game-related pieces of media, such as airings of Wreck-It Ralph, Smash Bros. And Street Fighter V tournaments, Let's Plays done by a guy named Parker Plays, and even speedruns. Most of this content ended up becoming lost or obscure over the years after they ceased airing it when the block ended. However, as time went on, the lost media community slowly started to accumulate more and more episodes that were aired, including missing ESL speedrunner episodes, Parker Plays, and more. And in February of 2025, the rest of Polaris Player Select was found, a series of clips from high-profile gaming YouTubers such as Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, making the entire block found, including everything that aired as far as we know. The Jaleel White Special. Jaleel White, famous for, of course, his portrayal of Steve Urkel in the ABC sitcom Family Matters, wanted to showcase more of his range as an actor and comedian, and so devised a one-time primetime TV special, which would end up airing on ABC in February of 1992, simply titled The Jaleel White Special. It's honestly pretty shocking that this was even lost at all, given it aired during the peak of Family Matters' popularity, which was one of the most popular sitcoms of the early 90s. Still, it was only a one-time event, and no known recordings could be located for decades. All that could be found was a short TV spot promoting the special.
Tonight, the man from Urkel, Jaleel White, stars in his own story of cinematic romance. Roll on! With Vanessa Williams' assist, Little Richard as his psychic, Nell Carter as the principal, and Urkel as himself.
However, suddenly in January of 2025, a YouTube account by the name of Pause Stop Eject Videos uploaded the entire special to YouTube, where it can still be watched today. Invincible Motion Comic.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
Oh boy, I've been aching to talk about this one. Even before it ended up kind of being found, being a huge fan of Invincible and all, especially with the absolute hype that came with Season 3's finale. If you know, you know. But anyways, Invincible definitely wasn't always this mainstream, less popular than Kirkman's other work, The Walking Dead, of course, which at this point hadn't even been adapted by AMC and became a household name. At this point, Invincible was only known to comic readers and was relatively niche. This is like the mid to late 2000s we're talking about right now. So when Invincible actually got a motion comic adaptation in 2008 on MTV, it sort of flew under the radar. This is before AMC would create the Walking Dead TV show in 2010, mind you. 6 episodes ended up being produced for MTV Mobile, but was also available on iTunes, anybody remember that? As well as Xbox Live and even Amazon. However, of course, at some point, the series was taken down and became lost media, obviously well before anything was in the works at Amazon in regards to the animated series. Only brief clips were available as well as a few images, until Instagram user @GeekStuffGT found all 6 of the lost episodes this year after getting on an old iPod, which takes me back to the Stone Age. Of course, this isn't exactly the best quality to find this in. I mean, it's essentially just cam footage of their iPod, but I guess it's better than nothing. I gotta say, the voice actor for Mark is pretty good. He honestly sounds pretty similar to Steven Yeun as well.
You know, you really ruined my afternoon. Well, now that I've got you all set,
Dark Castle MSX port. Dark Castle, originally released back in 1986 for the Macintosh, is an old-school platforming puzzle title developed by Silicon Beach Software, in which you play as Prince Duncan and have to navigate different areas of a castle while avoiding traps and solving puzzles, you know, the usual affair. The game was most notoriously covered by the Angry Video Game Nerd in this review of the Sega Genesis version of the game. Another version was quietly released exclusively in Japan for the MSX computer back in 1993 and was sold only on floppy disks, and later became quite obscure and later lost media entirely. Until in March of 2025, a user named Trev Gauntlet New was able to find and purchase the game from a Japanese game store, and later provided us with not only screenshots and gameplay footage, but also an archived copy which can be downloaded and played today. Shantae Advance: Risky Revolution. Developed and released in 2002 for the Game Boy Color by Way Forward, Shantae was a platformer starring the eponymous character as you traverse Sequin Land on an adventure to stop a pirate named Risky Boots, all the while unlocking new abilities such as unique dances and the ability to turn into different animals. The game was planned to have a sequel in 2003, despite the original game being commercially a flop, even though it did receive quite favorable reviews. This sequel was going to be released on the Game Boy Advance and went under a few working titles, such as Shantae 2 and simply Shantae Advance. Unfortunately, the game was cancelled after a publisher for the title could not be found, thanks to the poor sales of the original. However, quite a bit of development was completed for the game, which was going to feature even more abilities, such as flight, and even the ability to switch seamlessly between the foreground and backgrounds of the maps, and was also meant to include a 4-player co-op mode. Despite the game being cancelled, a demo from 2004 was known to exist, as co-creator of the series, Matt Bozon, played through it on Twitch back in 2014. Although no copy was available for the public to play, as he wasn't able to release it due to legal concerns. Shockingly though, almost a decade later, it was revealed that the game was still being worked on in 2023, and was going to be finished and released under the publisher Limited Run Games, who specialize in indie and more low-profile physical media releases. And in this year, in 2025, the full game was released for the Game Boy Advance, as well as the Nintendo Switch. But not only was the game released 2 decades after it was first announced, but the original demo from 2004 was also recovered and uploaded to the Internet Archive, and is also available to be played. Jumper and Singing Simon. Jumper and Singing Simon, created in 1988 by Sean Johnson, was an edutainment VHS program for young kids and toddlers, also sometimes known as Jumper the Frog and Singing Simon, featuring, you guessed it, Jumper the Talking Frog and his human companion, Singing Simon. This show was quite obscure and pretty short-lived, as just a few years later, some of its ideas and concepts were recycled into a different children's show in 1990, titled Eco, You, and Simon 2, which featured the same character from Jumper and Singing Simon. The tape was so obscure that no screenshots or footage could be found of it for years, until finally this year, in 2025, fellow Lost Media YouTuber El Supersonic Q managed to track it down and upload it to his second channel, where it can still be watched today. Also, El Supersonic Q made a whole video deep diving into the search for this lost show that almost no one had heard about or thought was real until it was eventually found. Thomas and Friends Pitch Pilot. Thomas and Friends, based on the Railway series books by Wilbert Awdry, this British children's series ran from 1984 all the way until 2021 and was a huge part of people's childhoods, both abroad and at home in the UK. The series was initially conceived in 1979 by Britt Alcroft, testing and developing a low-budget pitch pilot using live-action model animation, which would be finally shown to networks in April of 1983. This pilot was never actually released, due to the series getting a different first episode in 1984 on the ITV network. This was known as Thomas and Gordon in the UK, or Thomas Gets Tricked in the US, rather than Down the Mine, which was the pitch pilot episode, and was later created into the 26th broadcast episode, at least in the UK. The pitch pilot version was, however, slightly different, including many of the models which were said to be more simplistic in design and had quite a few faults, such as some of the eyes actually leaking smoke and moving during some of the shots, something that was fixed in the debut broadcast episode. There was also quite a bit of concept art, as well as images of the actual models used themselves. There are a few images from the production, including one which was found by Lost Media YouTuber Sewer Reviewer, who obtained it from an anonymous source. And in May of 2025, to celebrate the 80th anniversary of this franchise, a digitized and recreated version of the original pilot was uploaded officially to the Thomas and Friends YouTube channel. Super Mario Big Star Secret. Can't believe I'm saying this, but yes, Super Mario Big Star Secret was finally found. Well, not fully, but sort of, partially found anyway, but still worth talking about. If you haven't heard of this before, it's a rather huge search that's been going on for quite some time in the Lost Media community, in regards to an infamous Screamer video uploaded to YouTube back in August of 2007, known as Super Mario 64 Big Star Secret, that would later be deleted and never seen again. It became quite a popular topic in the community, thanks to the efforts of a dedicated subgroup and a guy named Marvel, who made a documentary on the hunt for this lost Mario jump scare video. The video itself was described as being a 5-minute long Windows Movie Maker production, with scrolling text informing the viewer on a fake way to unlock Luigi in the game, following a series of convoluted steps inside of the castle, before abruptly cutting to the infamous zombie jump scare that was used in many a Screamer video back in the day, but most famously this commercial. I'm sure you probably recognize this just from the background alone. The community was able to get in contact with the original uploader, who recalled certain elements of the video, but sadly did not have it in their possession. The only known footage of the video at this time was a reaction video called Little Brother Getting Scared Late Reaction, which showed low-resolution footage of the video, but only partially. Another breakthrough was made in 2024 thanks to another reaction video being found, this time which showed about 40 seconds of Big Star Secret, albeit also in poor quality. However, in a shocking twist of events, in May of 2025, footage of the first 47 seconds of the video were found on a Lost Media Wiki user's temp folder in their hard drive, which somehow backed up thousands upon thousands of old YouTube videos on a very old Windows XP PC, this being one of them. However, that still left over 4 minutes of the video still lost, and the jump scare itself remains elusive, but at least gives hope that one day this whole thing could eventually be found, especially with how seemingly dedicated people are to this specific case. Tip-Off NES port. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of things to talk about a little bit. So here we have a now found but originally lost canceled build of an Amiga game for the NES. It was originally released in 1991 for the Amiga, Atari ST, and Game Boy by Onco Software, and was a 16-bit basketball title. The game overall is pretty standard, but I do kind of find it weird that they wanted to release this game on the NES in 8-bit well after the release of the SNES, Genesis, and Amiga, so it's likely this port to the NES was going to be based on the game for the Game Boy, but was never actually finished and never got past early development, and even still, it was found in April of 2025. A floppy disk with the source code and an early build was located and released by the gaming website Games That Weren't on April 21st, 2025. Cyber Soldier Shuraku. One of the last pieces of media we're going to talk about in this volume, a Japanese exclusive CDI game from 1993. The game was a point-and-click adventure title taking place in the far future, focusing on the Galactic Federation and cyber soldiers that were waking up to their human consciousness. Because of the complete failure that was the CDI, this game did not sell well, and was region-locked to Japan, making it not only obscure, but also rare and hard to come by, just a few years after it was released. It wasn't until April of 2025 that Lost Media Wiki user, Shiroe NL, actually found a copy of the game and dumped it on the Internet Archive, where it is finally now playable. The game is also mostly cutscenes and QuickTime events, so a walkthrough can also be watched on YouTube. Jimmy Two Shoes Test Pilot. Created by Sean Scott and Edward Kay, and running from 2009 to 2011 for 2 seasons and 52 episodes, the series followed the character of Jimmy, a young boy living in the town of Miseryville, who goes about his life happily, while everyone else around him is miserable. Well, before the show aired, a 6-minute pitch pilot was created in 2006, which was much different from the final product, as the show was originally intended for much more mature audiences, at least conceptually, with the series being set in hell, which now it makes a lot more sense why everyone else is miserable and Jimmy is sort of happy-go-lucky. With the character of Heloise also originally being a serial killer and Heinous the Devil literally being Lucifer. The original plot of the pilot was rumored to feature Jimmy helping an old lady cross the street and dying in the process, and is sent to hell for being mistaken for a thief as he's hit by a car while picking up the old lady's wallet. However, the concept of hell and character designs were all cut down and toned down, with the concepts being reworked into a more children-friendly show before it ended up being greenlit. In May of 2025, this test pilot animation was uploaded in full by one of the co-creators, Edward Kay, to his personal YouTube channel. The episode is a lot more chill than you might expect, and not all that creepy and different from the actual show. But what is strange is how the pilot was actually acquired, as it wasn't just posted by the co-creator who had it all this time. According to him, in the description of this video, he claims, quote, "I still don't know who sent it to me. A DVD arrived literally on my doorstep with no note or address. Someone obviously just felt I should have it. They were probably afraid that there would be legal liabilities for sharing it, since everyone who had a copy had to sign a legal document saying they would not distribute it, hence the anonymity. I, however, never had to sign any such document, since I was never officially given one, so here it is." A pretty odd way for a piece of lost media to be found, and sounds more akin to something that would happen in a creepypasta, but I guess we'll take it.